Hey Matt, how are you?
Good. What am I supposed to call an attorney? It's my first time having a conversation with an attorney general of a state. What am I supposed to call
Andrew is
you?
fine. No, I'm just Andrew. I,
Is there like your honor? Do I have to have a title or?
no. I was only a captain in the army, and now suddenly I'm a general. I feel like I might have missed a couple, but yeah, I'm Andrew.
Well, thank you for coming on. We are recording right now. I typically have a team with me. No one's here today, so I'm trying to do the best I can with what I got.
Hey, you're doing great, man.
So I'm just gonna jump right into it because we have the Attorney General of the state of Missouri here with us today. So huge for people that watch the show, people that are part of the journey, people are part of the free thinker movement is what we call it, because we encourage people to think for themselves, to get out of the box, and to avoid getting into predetermined narratives and make your own decisions about life. That's what we really try to focus on here.
I love
And
it.
because we have Attorney General Andrew Bailey on, Andrew, you have announced that you're going to be filing a lawsuit from the state of Missouri to the state of New York for the prosecution of President Trump. First off, when are you filing that, and will it actually make a difference?
Yeah, look, it will make a difference, and we are filing it this week. We've got to do something to fight back against this unconstitutional lawfare that's really just an attempt to undermine the democratic process in the United States of America. Missourians, people across this country have a sovereign interest in fair elections and participating in those elections. And yet what's going on with the lawfare against President Trump is it's not intended to gain a legally valid conviction in a criminal case. It's only intended to take him off the campaign trail and silence him so he can't talk about issues tied up in those trials, which, by the way, all the issues tied up in those trials are directly relevant on decisions people make at the polling place. So this is an unconstitutional attack on our democratic process. Red states have to fight back, and Missouri's going to do that. We're going to file suit. It's going to be Missouri v. New York at the United States Supreme Court. Article 3, Section 2 of the United States Constitution gives the United States Supreme Court original jurisdiction over disputes between states. And right now, Missouri's got a big problem with New York.
But if after the lawsuits and the conviction in New York, people assume that it's going to go into appeals and then it's going to go into a Supreme Court anyway. Does this make a difference? Does it change anything? Does it expedite the process? What's the difference here?
Well, the difference is that the rights that will be adjudicated in President Trump's appeal of his criminal conviction in the state of New York are not those rights, and that process is not sufficient to protect the rights of Missourians to access and hear from a presidential candidate. An appeal in a criminal case takes 18 to 24 months, especially when you've got 34 counts in that indictment, and it's kind of a difficult legal charge. And so there's some nuance there that's going to take time to brief and get in front of the Court of Appeals in New York. And so the traditional remedies available are insufficient to protect the rights of Missourians. Remember, the First Amendment right to free speech applies not only to speakers, but to listeners. So when the judge puts a gag order in place and tethers President Trump to the trial, the courtroom itself, and then potentially sentences him to prison and or probation with conditions of confinement, that denies Missourians access to and to hear from that presidential candidate in the heat of a campaign in the most consequential election in this nation's history. And so we've got to find a different mechanism to remedy the grievances of the people of the state of Missouri that want to hear from the president.
And other states or people that are maybe against this action, they're going to say that maybe you have no grounds, that this is politically motivated because we say that the prosecution of President Trump was politically motivated. And then they'll say, well, Attorney General Bailey's lawsuit is politically motivated. How do you separate the two and say this is actually legitimate versus a political, lack of the word, stunt?
Yeah, look, the conviction of the president of the United States in New York, that case is replete with constitutional error. You need look no further than the fact that President Biden's Department of Justice deployed the third-ranking official and former DNC activist Matthew Colangelo to assist Alvin Bragg at the trial court level prosecution. That means those prosecutors are politically motivated and have a self-interest in the case and should have been disqualified from the case. That is an incurable, reversible error. Look at the four corners of the indictment itself. 34 counts of fraudulent business records with a nebulous and undefined other crime as the predicate offense. That is a clear violation of the president's right to due process, to have notice of the crimes for which he's charged. The difference here is we're actually fighting for Missourians' rights. Missourians have a right to hear from President Trump, and the state of New York has barred President Trump from speaking on certain matters. And again, we're not talking about normal circumstances. Let's take us to 1860. Would anyone have tolerated a rogue prosecutor in the South who prosecuted Abraham Lincoln for speaking on abolition and took him off the campaign trail in 1860? No way anyone would have tolerated that. So why would we put up with it today?
And because then the premise of the case is that the prosecution of President Trump is removing citizens' ability to have access to President Trump during their campaign, then do you see other states following suit? And have you talked to any other attorney generals to kind of go in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I work with my colleagues all the time in lawsuits similar to this one. I am confident we've already had contact with several other states, and I think that other states will be weighing in on this issue because other states recognize as well as I do that this kind of lawfare undermines the democratic process and that their constituents also have a right to access and hear from a presidential candidate.
And you said that we should be expecting that lawsuit this week. Do we have a timeline? Is there anything you can give away? Where are we? Because I feel like a lot of people are saying, Andrew Bailey said he was going to do this on X, and we're kind of still waiting. Where are we?
Yeah, it will be filed. I promise you. We're working on the drafting right now. I've reviewed documents that are relevant and legal arguments relevant to the case we're going to make. Timing is important. It takes time to put together a sufficient legal argument that's worthy of filing at the United States Supreme Court. We want to put our best case on. And so that's why we're taking our time to make sure we've dotted the I's and crossed the T's. And we will absolutely take the best shot available to us. And again, the founding fathers contemplated that there would be disputes between the states, and that's why they codified a procedure in Article 3, Section 2 that allows us to file the suit. We will have it on file this week.
And how fast do you think the Supreme Court will look at this? Because again, like you mentioned, it goes straight to the Supreme Court. When do you think they'll actually get involved? Or is this something that's going to go on their docket and we won't actually see resolution until after the election?
Well, there's a unique docket available to the Supreme Court for original actions at the Supreme Court. In other words, typically the Supreme Court exercises appellate review over decisions made at lower courts that kind of matriculate through the system. This case is a case of original jurisdiction at the United States Supreme Court. So there's a special docket for it, first and foremost. But secondly, we are asking the court to move quickly because after the president is sentenced here in 3 weeks, again, that sentencing decision made by the trial court judge at the state level in New York directly impacts the rights of citizens of other states to hear from and have access to a presidential candidate. That decision at sentencing it directly implicates the integrity of our election process.
And we're mentioning sentencing. What do you think, off top of your head, if you had to guess, what kind of sentencing do you think we'd see for President Trump in 3 weeks?
Well, the fact that they didn't dismiss the case based on all the constitutional errors in the first instance means that they're hell-bent on sentencing him to a period of confinement. You know, what that looks like is going to be up to the trial court judge, whether that's an actual prison term or just shock time in a county jail as a condition of probation or, you know, onerous terms of home confinement and community service. Any of those things, any restrictions on his speech and or travel, again, those restrictions imposed by the trial court will infringe on Missourians' rights and form the basis of our lawsuit.
And I mean, off the top of my head, when I first heard that he was convicted and found guilty, the idea of them imprisoning him seemed kind of crazy, right? He's required Secret Service detail, and the process to put him in a prison would be logistically probably impossible. You would have to dedicate an entire wing for him, give Secret Service in and out access, keep him away from general population. The logistics of it seems impossible. And if they were to arrest him on the spot, then I feel like we would know leading up to it, because there's no way you can keep something like that quiet and private. At the same time, even just to restrict him in his movement to campaign, that seems unlikely too. I feel like that would backfire. Do you see them actually doing anything, or do you think just the title of convicted felon is really what they were going after, and that's really enough?
Well, it's the title of convicted felon. It's the removal of President Trump from the campaign trail where 4 days a week he had to be in Manhattan in the trial, like at the courtroom. And so, again, any onerous conditions that restrict his movement, whether it be that he's required to conduct a certain amount of community service each month or periods of house arrest or anything like that, you know, again, those violate the those are an attack on the integrity of our democratic process in the election. What I will tell you is that typically people don't go to prison for false documents. Typically that's a probation offense. Again, the fact that this court moved in the way it did and made rulings the way it did seems to indicate that they're treating this case differently than others, and that concerns me that they're going to try to imprison him. Again, in most instances, individuals who are sentenced to a period of confinement, they're allowed an opportunity to post an appeal bond and stay out on bond while they adjudicate the appeal of the criminal matter. And only after adjudication of that appeal would they then be required to report to a Department of Corrections for a period of confinement. But who knows how the state of New York will behave? I mean, again, if the past behavior is any indication, we should all be very concerned.
And I'm assuming Attorney General Alvin Bragg pretty well. Is it someone that you have a relationship with? And if so, what were they thinking, and what were your conversations been like with them?
I've never met Alvin Bragg. He's a district attorney in the state of New York. Letitia James is the attorney general of the state of New York. I've never met or spoken with her either, but I tell you, you can see it in their civil litigation against President Trump. You can hear it in their campaign promise to prosecute President Trump. You can see it in their behavior when Alvin Bragg initially declined to charge President Trump with these offenses, and then only later, after the statute of limitations had already expired on the predicate offenses and President Trump no longer could raise a defense, did they bootstrap those expired charges onto the fraudulent business record charge and file the indictment. So the past behavior in New York is deplorable and demonstrates this is a politically motivated witch hunt. And that's why we should be concerned. That's why red states finding ways to fight back are important.
And it's kind of concerning because you're seeing the politicalization of the justice system in all these states going after President Trump. And it's setting a really bad precedent because moving forward, is this something that we're going to see more often? How do you keep the politicalization of justice systems in each individual state, not even just the federal level, but in the state level? How do you keep this out of here? Because it's going to be a huge problem moving forward.
It is. We have systems in place in Missouri. They have systems in place in New York. The difference is the systems in Missouri worked and in New York, they failed. So it's really a tale of two cities. Let me put this in perspective. In the city of St. Louis, they had a Soros-backed prosecutor who had a 96% non-prosecution rate. Victims were suffering. More than 500 businesses had left downtown St. Louis. And this Soros-backed prosecutor had undermined the credibility of our entire criminal justice system. She was committing politically motivated prosecutions, and the court caught on to that and disqualified her from those cases. And ultimately, I filed the lawsuit that removed her from office. So our systems of checks and balances in the state of Missouri prevented lawfare and removed the Soros-backed prosecutor. In New York, Alvin Bragg's a Soros-backed prosecutor. There are 3 different legal mechanisms in the state of New York to sanction a rogue prosecutor. And certainly the trial court judge should have detected the impropriety from his political attacks on President Trump and disqualified him from the case. The trial court failed to do so. And those 3 systems that can hold in check a rogue prosecutor have not been engaged and thus have failed to protect not only New Yorkers, but President Trump as an individual and all Americans, thereby also undermining the credibility of the criminal justice system in New York. There's a common thread through all of this, and that's that George Soros also backs the Vera Institute. This is a radical progressive group that's dedicated to dismantling the criminal justice system. And it moves in and teaches prosecutors how to not file cases and the excuses they can use to get out of doing that work of which they've been employed and hired by the people of each state to do. The Vera Institute is funded by George Soros, is partnered with both the Circuit Attorney's Office in St. Louis that we removed and Alvin Bragg. And guess what? Biden's Department of Justice administers grants on behalf of the Vera Institute. So there's a common thread through all of this. While crime is rampant throughout the city streets of New York and in the subways, Alvin Bragg ignores that, but weaponizes government to go against a political opponent. The systems in Missouri worked. The systems in New York have failed.
I think a lot of people are really concerned because the crime in all of the cities are the highest it's ever been. I have zero incentive to go anywhere near a big city these days. It's just not clean. It's dangerous. It's just kind of chaotic. And I don't see how this gets better. Do you think a new president actually makes a difference within the cities? And how do other states and other attorney generals clean up their own states? And what have you done to kind of keep it livable?
Well, first and foremost, thank God we have the God-given right to keep and bear arms to defend ourselves, our property, our families, our loved ones. That's a right that comes from God, not man. It's protected by the Constitution, and the government exists to protect those rights. That's why things like lawfare are so offensive to our system, because they're a weaponization of the government to destroy people's rights. It's a perversion of the entire system. But here in the state of Missouri, since I've been in office for the past 18 months, we have increased criminal prosecution by 133%. That's an effective deployment of state resources in the fight against violent crime. Just last year alone, we defended more than 400 convictions on appeal to make sure the bad guys stay locked up. And I do think that when you have a new president in power, President Trump put America first. And he enforced the rule of law. And it starts with immigration law. When foreigners are allowed to disrespect this country by crossing our borders illegally, because those borders cease to mean anything, our national sovereignty ceases to mean anything when President Biden flung open the border, it undermines the credibility of the entire system. The law doesn't mean anything. And that motivates criminal behavior at home amongst American citizens as well. So I do think having a president who favors the rule of law, who respects the rule of law, and fulfills rule of law principles like President Trump, putting America first, I think that's a great first step in correcting these problems.
And I'm thinking about this because I live in Georgia. I'm outside about 20 miles north of Atlanta. And obviously there's another court case going on here. And here we have judges that are questionable, to say the least. It's been a mess with the judges and everyone that's involved with Trump's trials here, President Trump's trials here. We have a conservative Republican attorney general for the state of Georgia, but yet here in Atlanta, somehow we are kind of all these rogue courts going after President Trump. What is that balance between on the state level and within the cities? Because Atlanta accounts for a huge portion of Georgia.
Yeah, those relationships are codified in state statutes. So each state defines those relationships differently. Here in the state of Missouri, since 1875, local prosecutors and sheriffs are the chief law enforcement officers of the 114 counties that make up the state of Missouri, plus the city of St. Louis, so 115 different jurisdictions. And then the state's authority is only comes into effect when you've got a prosecutor who's so bad that the attorney general has to file a lawsuit to remove her. And that's what we did in the city of St. Louis against the Soros-backed prosecutor, Kim Gardner. Again, how those relationships work in the state of Georgia are going to be defined by Georgia state statute. And I do think there's a constant kind of tug and pull in that process as things ebb and flow. And it's up to the General Assembly in each state to enact new statutes to adapt to that changing environment. And
going to elections, you are running for, you're in the middle of a primary for your own election. And it seems like you're doing a good job. I'd say, who are the best attorney generals in the country? And people say Andrew Bailey, Ken Paxton. That's kind of the two names that are thrown out there. And they also say, if there's an attorney general for President Trump in the future, they say in the running would be Andrew Bailey, Ken Paxton. How does that make you feel? And where are you in the process of your own election?
Hey, look, it's an honor to even be considered and be mentioned in that kind of category and in that class. At the end of the day, I'm a patriot. I'm a Christian. I'm a father. I'm a veteran. When I went to school on an Army ROTC scholarship and volunteered for combat service in Iraq, deployed twice, had the privilege of leading soldiers in combat. When I took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, I was willing to put my life on the line to do it. I took that fight to the enemies of freedom and the battlefields of the war on terror. And I'm proud to be leading that fight now on behalf of the people of the state of Missouri. And I think this is the show me state. Results matter. And people have seen the work we've done to protect our First and Second Amendment rights, protect our Constitution, defend children, defend the unborn, hold criminal wrongdoers accountable through criminal prosecution, remove the Soros-backed prosecutor. Those are major wins we've scored on behalf of the people of the state of Missouri, and people are excited about this campaign. At the end of the day, I'm up against a New Yorker who was deposited in Missouri and is backed by a Wall Street billionaire trying to buy a political office for someone out of state. Why would a Wall Street billionaire want to buy a political office in Missouri for a New Yorker? Well, it's not to help Missourians. And when people hear that, they get unhappy about that. And so we get a lot of support from folks that, again, appreciate the work we're doing and want to protect Missouri for Missourians.
And how is that even possible? I feel like there should be a law, and I know there isn't, but the office you run for, that has to be not only where you live, but kind of where you're from, because you're supposed to represent the community around you. And we've seen it in elections all over the country where the people that run for office and win office have no tie to the community that they're supposed to represent. Is there anything that if you could recommend that could be done to protect that. Because again, I feel like the people that are running for office in a certain area should be from that area. I feel like that's such common sense. Why is that not a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, my opponent, Wall Street Willie, does not share Missouri values. He's got East Coast elitist values, and that's why he doesn't fit in here, and that's why the voters are largely rejecting him. I do think there needs to be a heightened residency requirement for some of these offices. Wall Street Willie couldn't run for any other office in Missouri because it has an elevated residency requirement. Attorney General is just different, so that's a statute that needs to be updated. But yeah, I think you're right. When you've got out-of-towners who show up with a bag full of money, dark money at that, and want to buy a political office, it's not to serve the constituents, it's to push some other radical agenda that is not favored by the people of this state. And so that's why we're fighting back and winning at that.
And so many people are disenfranchised by the election system right now. I think 2020 was a huge eyebrow raiser for a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there that are losing faith in the election system. And I tell people, you got to vote anyway, but it's really hard. What do you think about kind of the election system where we are, and if you had any recommendations for them?
Well, first and foremost, know that not all is not lost. We can restore America and put America first again. I think President Trump started a movement, and people are excited to see that movement continue in 2024 and get President Trump back in office. That's why I support President Trump. And I'll tell you, we're going to put Missourians and Americans first here in the state of Missouri. We've been fighting and winning to stop interference in our election. We've done that in our case, Missouri v. Biden, to end government censorship on big tech so that we can have free, fair, and open debate about political issues. We've done that to fight back against lawfare by filing amicus briefs in each of the suits in which the left has attacked President Trump. And we're doing that now to fight for Missourians' rights to have access and hear from their preferred presidential candidate, and filing this suit, Missouri v. New York, at the United States Supreme Court. I would say that there's more than 1 million gun-owning Missourians who are not registered to vote. And so to my friends and patriots out there who are Missouri residents, or anywhere in the nation for that matter, find a friend, a colleague, a patriot, a gun owner who is not registered to vote. Take them with you to the polling place and take them to vote. We've got to wrap our arms around the rest of our community and amplify our voices through a collective shared voice of shared values. And that's how we fight back. That's how we retake America. That's how we put America first again and protect our freedom and national identity.
Yeah, I mean, we say that on the show all the time. Just take a friend to vote. Even if you think the voting system is rigged, you have nothing to lose by going and voting yourself, and you have nothing to lose by convincing the friend that you said, I'm not going to vote because voting system is rigged. We all have that friend. Just be like, hey, bro, let's go. I got you. I'll buy some lunch. Let's just go do it real quickly. Buy some coffee. Not a big deal. Go pick up a friend on the way. Takes 15 minutes of your time. Not the end of the world. And even if you think the system is broken and your vote doesn't matter, you literally have nothing to lose but 15 minutes of your time.
Yeah, look, the Second Amendment community could be the deciding factor in every election this year. And certainly that's true in the state of Missouri. I believe that to be true nationally, and I'm sure it's true in the state of Georgia and other states. We've got to band together as freedom-loving Americans who believe that the rights codified in the Constitution come from God, not man, and that the Constitution protects us from the government. If you believe those things, I guarantee you've got a friend, a relative, a cousin, a neighbor who also believes those things. Find them, help them register to vote, and then help them get to the polling place. And we will sway this election and start fighting and winning again.
Can we do a little bit of speculation now that we've kind of made it through a lot of things I wanted to ask you? Can we do a little bit of speculation while I got you?
Let's do it.
Who do you think the vice president is going to be?
Man, there's so many good choices. You know, I hear Tim Scott's name. I hear Bergram from, is it North Dakota? Hear that name. I mean, look, President Trump is going to choose a fantastic candidate that agrees that we've got to make America great again and wants to put Americans first and can help support his policy objective of securing our southern border, making our streets safer, fighting the foreign trade issues to protect working Americans and Missourians at that, and restore American industry. I mean, there are so many good things on the horizon, and I'm confident that President Trump will make the right selection.
And if you get the call to get a position, I'm kind of rooting for you. So if you get the call, but then you're going through this primary season, where does that put you? And do you say yes to a call? President Trump and Team Trump, if you're watching, maybe you want to bookmark this one.
I appreciate that. It is an honor and a privilege to get to serve as Missouri's Attorney General, and I will always take President Trump's call and fight side by side with him in his movement to make America great again in whatever role or capacity he would deem appropriate. I am myopically focused on serving the people of the state of Missouri as our Attorney General. It's a privilege to get to do it.
And that's a tough one, right? Because you have a commitment to your constituency, you have a commitment to your community, you want to do the best you can, and then you get a call to do maybe a bigger calling, and you kind of want to go. It's a big job. It's a big opportunity. You can do more, but you don't want to leave your community behind. It's such a hard balance.
Well, where can you do the most good? I think that's the ultimate question. I've got 4 small children. I'm from Missouri. I have an 11-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And every morning I get up and I drive them to the school bus, to the bus stop, and I get to talk to them and spend a little time with them. And it reminds me why I do this job. It's because I value freedom, safety, and prosperity, things I got to grow up with as a child in Missouri. And that's what I'm fighting to defend for them, for your listeners and your viewers, kids and grandkids. And wherever I can go to protect those things is where I want to be. And right now, that's as Missouri's Attorney General.
And that's so tough because my daughter is 2 years old. So I'm in the thick of, oh my gosh, this society is falling apart. What am I going to do? Right? Because you look around and it's not what I remember. It's not what I want for my children. I want better opportunity for them. I want them to have the freedoms. I feel like we're going to run into a future where they're going to have a conscious decision of, do I want to be plugged into this Borg machine of whatever this dystopian future is, versus do I want my child to be free thinking? Do I want her to be critically thinking? Do I want her to be able to make her own decisions in life? And you almost see this crazy dystopian future coming. We all see it. What do you do to protect your children?
Well, first and foremost, teaching responsible firearm ownership, I think, is critical because that's how we're going to defend ourselves. We have a constitutional God-given right to defend our persons, our homes, our property, our livelihood, our families. I think that's really critical. It's also a bulwark against a tyrannical government. I see the Biden administration causing us to slouch towards this kind of dictatorial, tyrannical third world banana republic. We saw the worst of the worst from the left during COVID and some of the COVID tyranny with the mandates and illegal, unconstitutional behavior. That was a natural impulse of the left. It was just exposed during a pandemic, and it's gotten worse during the Biden administration. So being educated, being informed, and being armed are really critical to protecting our rights and our freedoms.
How do you like, you have 4 children. It is a lot of work because you're an extremely busy man. How do you balance your time between your children, your family, and kind of trying to protect the state and trying to protect the country? It's so much on your shoulders. How do you find that balance?
A lot of prayer, but at the end of the day, it's a soft Tampa 2 cover zone defense that we're running on the kids. 2 parents, 4 kids. It's just my wife and I. So we keeping everything in front of us, kind of a bend don't break defense is critical. But I love my kids. I love getting to spend time with my kids. They appreciate the work that I do on behalf of our home state. They know how important this is because we talk about it every chance we get, and they see some of the fights we're in, and they know that we're trying to build a better future for them and protect the core values that made this nation great, so we can hand on that legacy of excellence to the next generation.
And how old were they before you started having these more difficult, more mature, older conversations? Before you're like, hey, there's something wrong with society and we need to figure this out. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to educate you. I'm trying to teach you. When do you think you made that shift between they're just children and we need to educate them more?
We started at birth, honestly. I mean, as Christians, we believe that we have salvation through Christ, and that the Bible is the inerrant word of God. And so imparting that wisdom upon our children and raising them in a Christian home started the conversation. And then our value that we place on our ability to worship God and our ability to go to church and engage in our Christian faith, those are rights that come from God, not man. But we are fortunate enough to live in a country that protects those rights. And how do we protect those rights? And so the conversation starts there, and it builds off of that. And you start as young as that you can get them to sit still and listen, and you just keep saturating and increasing the conversation as they get older.
Well, I think that's amazing. That's what I've been thinking about a lot lately. The idea that we rely on politics a lot. and we think that politics will save America, but reality is probably God will save America. That's kind of our only last hope at this point. Society is going into such a wrong, weird, odd direction. And I'm concerned, obviously, because of children. But I feel like having leaders and leaders in society that are open about their faith, willing to have at least a discussion about their faith and Christianity, I think that's helpful. I think that's a good start, because when people like you say things like this out loud, it encourages people to have these conversations at home. And I'm not a Christian religious show, but the further and further and along the line we go, and more that society seems to take this hard left turn, I feel like this is the only real option we have.
We are one nation under God. We are offered salvation from our Creator through Christ, and it's up to each of us to make that decision. And I'm proud to live in a home that promotes that for my children. And I want everyone to have that opportunity. God gives everyone that opportunity. It's up to us to spread that good word and certainly introduce people to biblical truths. And that's what we do at my house. And
I just saw this news about Louisiana, I believe, requiring the 10 Commandments to be in the schools. Is that a real thing? And is that something that Missouri would think about doing? And is that constitutional? Can you even do that?
Well, there's been really odd jurisprudence from the United States Supreme Court on this very issue. They allowed the 10 Commandments to be posted at on the grounds of the Texas State Capitol in Austin, Texas, but then struck down a requirement or at least the display of the 10 Commandments in courthouses in the state of Kentucky. So you have this really kind of odd situation where 9 cultural elites on the Supreme Court are calling balls and strikes. If you read the actual text of the First Amendment, it says Congress shall pass no law affecting the establishment of a religion. It was a limitation on the power of Congress, and the original intent from the founders was to protect state churches. That was then altered with the passage of the 14th Amendment after the Civil War. It was never intended to drive Christian ideology, Christian thought, or discussion of the Christian faith from public discourse. That was never the intent. And so I think the court has misinterpreted and misapplied the limitations in the First Amendment. And ultimately, I do believe that the 10 Commandments posted in classrooms in the state of Louisiana is something that Louisiana has the authority to do, and is a good thing. I mean, those are basic principles of morality. Who can argue against them?
And final thing I kind of want to ask you about: censorship. Censorship is crazy. And my opinion, shadow banning is just as bad as censorship. Actually, shadow banning is a form of censorship. Absolutely. And we're seeing it on every single platform. It is so difficult, especially if you're a conservative, that to get your ideas out there. And TikTok, they will just delete your videos. Happens to me all the time. Instagram and Meta, they'll be like, oh, we don't like this one. We're just not going to show it to anybody. Actually, all of them do it. Even YouTube. YouTube may be the worst. What are you guys doing to fight censorship? And is that something that you think there's actually being progress on?
Yes. The right to free speech is fundamental to who we are as an American people. It's a marketplace of free, fair, and open ideas. It's a competition of ideas where the truth prevails through argument. The left can't win the argument, so the left wants to censor conservative voices of truth. We filed suit in the case Missouri v. Biden, the most important First Amendment suit in this nation's history. Through preliminary discovery, tens of thousands of pages of documents, numerous depositions, we've uncovered a relationship of coercion and collusion from the Biden administration across a spectrum of bureaucratic agencies targeting conservative voices for silencing, for censorship on big tech social media. I can show you the documents where the White House says, take down that Tucker Carlson video, take down that Tommy Lahren post, de-emphasize, de-platform anyone who disagrees with President Biden's tyrannical government. The censorship demands that the Biden administration placed on big tech grew so quickly, the government had to design and develop a new bureaucratic apparatus to manage them. It's now housed in the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Administration, CISA, within the Department of Homeland Security. So let that sink in for a minute. The Department of Homeland Security, which was created in the wake of 9/11 to protect Americans from foreign attack, has now been weaponized against Americans to silence our voices. Guess what? 100% of the voices that were silenced were conservative voices. And guess what else? 100% of the speech that was silenced was core political speech. The remedy for disfavored speech in this country has always been counter speech, not government censorship. The Biden administration has abandoned that approach. No one would tolerate it if we were talking on a cell phone, talking about things the government didn't like, and all of a sudden the government started muting us. Well, why are we tolerating that on big tech? The big tech marketplace operates differently because of the court's misinterpretation of Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act, which is a separate conversation. But I say all that to say this. We are awaiting a decision for the United States Supreme Court in the case of Missouri v. Biden. And the First Amendment right to free speech, absent government censorship, will prevail. We're going to use this lawsuit to build a wall of separation between tech and state to protect our First Amendment rights. And we're going to build that wall out and use merits discovery to root out this vast censorship enterprise so that we have the right to speak freely and hear freely in accordance with our First Amendment protections.
And you've seen a lot of documents. You've seen the emails, you've seen the communications. I've seen some of the briefs. There's a lot of stuff in there. It's really shocking if anyone watching or listening has not seen them. Definitely worth checking out. Opinion. Which one's the worst of the censorship? Which one do you think is the worst one?
You know, the shadow banning and deplatforming is really bad because oftentimes the target of censorship doesn't understand or know that they've been censored. And in the example I used previously, if the government were muting our cell phone conversation, we would detect and know that and potentially have some alternate means of communication. But you might just lose audience or lose, a voice in the conversation through government sponsored, government mandated deplatforming and de-emphasizing. You might never know that. And again, the First Amendment right to free speech protects not only the speaker, but the listeners, thus anyone who has received any information or would receive any information on any social media platform over the past 10 years has been harmed by this censorship regime.
Attorney General Andrew Bailey, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for giving us your time. Definitely go support Attorney General Andrew Bailey. I'm going to use the full title because it's a respectful thing to do, Your Honor. I don't know what else to say. Thank you for coming on, and definitely go check him out. Link to everything he's done before, and let's just show him support. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
Awesome. We'll cut it there. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
No, thanks, man. Really appreciate you. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, that was great. You were really good. Phenomenal. I think you should do more of these and just spit fire. I think you're really good at that. It's wow.
Thank you.
It's fascinating. I speak to a lot of politicians, a lot of people that have position of power or whatever, and you are definitely like top tier. So,
well, thanks. I'm not much of a politician. I have no interest in being a politician. That's the problem.
And maybe that's what we need in America. You know, too many politicians want to be politicians.
Yeah, that's right. I appreciate what you do, man. Thanks for covering us, and thanks for having us on.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too.